Now I'm not going to bore you with the details here, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a zip tie here and one here and probably one here. It's going to be awkward because there's no other holes on this side, and then one over here in the corner. So I'll be back in a minute, so you don't have to watch me put in the zip ties. On second thought, I will let you watch me put in a couple of these. What I do is I feed it through the motherboard hole. Alright, I lift up the motherboard a little, feed it through halfway, and bring my finger under. You may notice I turned the motherboard around because this is the back side of the rig. Okay, and slide it to where I want it, and then slip that in, and then I swing it on underneath. Now I don't want to torque that down hard, okay? I just want it snug. I do not want that to be too tight. I don't want to end up breaking anything on the motherboard. I just want it just snug. I can tighten this one a little bit. Alright? I just want to prevent sliding around when I am working on the cards and stuff. I think, let me see, yeah, right here. Right on through, and bring it to the bottom so that the head of the zip tie is hidden later. And if it's too tight, I will remove it. I don't want to hurt this. Alright, there's still some flex room in there. I do not want to hurt this motherboard. Now the nature of the Dell, there's nuts are on the bottom of this, and they're touching the board, the frame. So I'm not going to tighten this hard. I don't want to hurt that or fracture the motherboard, okay? This is a very unique setup with the Dell computers and probably some of the other manufacturers that do their own. Most of your custom built computers are not going to have that issue. Alright. Again, just enough so when I'm inserting and removing my USB mouse and keyboard and memory stick, this isn't going to move on me. That's all I want. I want to make sure there's enough room to flex here. I don't want that too tight on the frame that there's any stress on the motherboard at all. We don't want to break that or damage it in any way. But yet now it's firm, okay? Now I'm going to set up my power supply on here, and I've set this up so that the motherboard is suspended on the frame. I didn't feel the need for putting any extra framing under the motherboard because once you put this together, it's done. But I would advise you strongly, when you put it together, ground yourself out on some metal, put your hand underneath, and when you press in a graphic card or anything else, RAM or whatever, make sure you put even upwards and downwards pressure at the same time as you're inserting anything so as not to break your motherboard or stress it, okay? And like I said, once you're done, this is just going to sit here, so you don't need any more support down here for the duration. Now over here I've put spacing so you can fit two power supplies side by side on here, either front to back or side to side. I intentionally designed it that way so I could fit two power supplies as needed on here. Alright, so now I'm going to lay out my power supply and figure where I want it, as well as my hard drive. So I'll be back in a minute when I figure out where that's going to go. Alright, I've got the power supply on, and I used 4 zip ties. It gives me nice crisp corners, and then I go and I cut the ends off once I've got it in place. And it looks really nice and neat this way. And the thing about zip ties is later if I want to change something, it's very quick. It's 2 cuts and this power supply is out of here. When you're mining, downtime is wasted money. So I don't want to lose any income. So therefore I make it quick disconnect, quick change. So I prefer the zip ties. Alright? Now the hard drive here, I'm not sure which hard drive until I boot this up, so I'm going to set this on here for now, okay? I've got to figure out if this is hard drive A or B based on the if it boots up with Windows that I installed. So the next step is I'm going to put my graphic card on board. I'll get my power on here, and we'll get a data cable on the hard drive, and then we'll take it over and we'll fire this up and see if it runs, okay? Now, here's what I meant. Make sure I touch something metal and short myself out. put the power supply cable on there and make sure you got pressure under the motherboard, so when you insert that you don't damage your motherboard. Alright, top and bottom even pressure, you don't damage your motherboard. Okay, so then you've got your ATX plug on here, and then I've got to figure a way, that plugs in light and easy so I didn't stress about it. I've got to figure a way here to get the cooler hooked up. So I'm probably going to run some zip ties along here to keep that neat. Alright? So, before I fire this up, I do need to get the cooler going. So I'll be back in a minute then and I figure that out. Now this is unique with this particular Dell, alright, that I have to find a way to get that on there. So that's not a normal problem with mining. And then we'll be back. Now this table is wobbly, not the rig. There's a bump here. We'll be back in a few minutes. Now what I've done, I've run a serial ATA cable, this orange wire, from the motherboard to the hard drive. Again, I haven't fastened it because I'm not sure if this is A or B. I should have paid attention when I ripped it out, but I'll figure it out in a minute. I've taken the extra power wires and I've just flipped them over the top of their frame so they're out of my way for now. When I'm done, I've also hooked up the power to the hard drive. When I'm done, I'll pretty this up. Now I've got the fan up here with 2 zip ties and hanging at an angle over the processor cooler, and I'll keep an eye on that and see if it's going to be cool to the touch. Once Windows is set up, once all the drivers are installed, well they are actually already, once that's all established and I'm ready to mine, I can reboot into BIOS and fine-tune the processor, and I can turn off the extra cores and anything I don't need on that processor to reduce wasted power and keep that cooler. Alright, now I'm going to put the graphic card back on the motherboard. Now in this case I'm going to use the one on the motherboard, the slot on the motherboard. Okay, and try to see if you can see what I'm doing here. Okay, touch something grounded while I work always. Okay, now this is just going to go in here for now, right on in there. Now this is a GTX 1050, so it does not need its own power supply separately. Again, get your hand under there. I'm trying to show you on camera while I do it, but make sure that's firmly in place. You don't want anything to slip or not be secure. Alright, I'm going to double check that before I turn it on again, once again. And I'm also going to make sure it's not touching anything. But you never know with these computers when you're putting things together like this. You want to make sure there's nothing touching any capacitors or anything on the main board so that you don't have any shorts, okay? Alright, now we're going to take this over and we're going to fire it up. Okay guys, one thing I forgot to mention is the front panel switch, the on-off switch. I don't know if you can see it. I can't see the camera display. Yeah, right here. I stuck it into the motherboard. I usually keep the original front panel connections, especially if it's a stock computer like this. And that way it makes it easier because it's just a jumper right there and it's got my LEDs and everything. And in a minute when I'm done I'll put it on here and I'll have a nice little display and a simple push button. So I'm going to turn on the power. I put in my mouse and keyboard. I put in my video cable, power, flip on the switch. We had a happy light blinking there. That's a good sign. I don't know if you can see that. Hit the button and we have life. Okay, there's the old Dell boot up. So there it is, guys. Now I'm going to boot this up and then I'm going to put in the second graphic card on the frame here. So we'll be back in a little bit. Oh, good point to mention. Since I removed all the drives, the computer's mad at me. So now I have to enter BIOS, hit F2 to run the setup utility, and I have to go turn off all the devices in the BIOS. I hadn't done that, so the drives, it's mad at me because I don't have any more drives. So I'm going to take all them out, and I'm going to have only serial ATA1, serial ATA2 will be off, and then PATA and all that. All that'll be off. Alright, so we'll leave all that. Alright, and then I'll escape and save, and then it should boot up without any complaint. Now I've got to keep an eye on this cooler. Actually, there's a very nice amount of airflow here. New boot device available. Okay then, so I've got to use the other hard drive. That's why I did not secure it. The CPU cooler is working well. Very nice. There's a lot of airflow, and it also hits my chipset here. My onboard chipset cooler. So that's good. Alright, I'm going to swap hard drives, boot this thing up, and then we'll be back when it's time to put in the other graphic card. Alright guys, there's a happy sight. So the computer is, the mining rig so far is looking good, and it is booting into Windows. Alright, it's an old computer, so it's slow, but it's booting up. Alright, there it is. So we're gonna let this run a minute and test it on mining, and then I'll be back to insert the other graphic card, and then we'll clean this thing up, tidy it up, and run it. Alright guys, I got my miner shut down again, ground myself out. I turn this off, but I can still short myself out on that a little bit. Now I've got my riser, and actually I'm going to pull the plug on this and make sure there's no power left as I work. Okay, I'm going to remove the network cable so no static charge gets in there. Alright, now ground myself out on another computer here. I'm going to put the riser in. This tab goes forward, just like on the graphic card, okay? Make sure you do that so you don't blow up your computer. Insert it firmly, and then the riser card I'll put on the graphic card. Try not to handle the card itself too much, and then clip that lock in place. Now we'll get this up here. I'm going to have to go get a screw and put the USB plug into here. Alright, and I'm going to go get a screw for this and mount that firmly in place. Alright, so I'll be back in a minute. Okay, I've got the second card on there, and I turn on the computer, and nothing happened. Sometimes you have to start it one or two times, and you might have to switch primary displays to figure out which is display number 1 and which is display number 2. The way I knocked over my cooler, I'll secure that better when I know exactly where I want it. It seems to be working well. So I need to check and see if it's which one is primary display. That could vary. Do we get anything here? No signal. Oh, I got a black screen. What's going on? Something's happening. You might have to boot it a couple times now and then. I'll wait and see what goes on if it's doing something. So I'll play with this a minute and I'll be back once I get it to boot up properly. Sometimes you have to turn it on and off a couple times to get the motherboard to work with the two different cars. I didn't have to turn it off, I waited a minute. Typical with Microsoft. See the mouse? It's booting, it's doing something. That's a typical Microsoft thing. Windows is thinking, so I'll let it run a while.